How's that for a slice of fried gold?
You think this is a fucking costume? This is a way of life.
I'll be back.
Just a flesh wound. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
I'm sorry, Ben. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
Well, hello, and welcome to...
Recording?
Yeah, I'm recording.
It doesn't say record on my end.
Yeah, he's been recording the whole time. Or, well, not the whole time, but like...
Why else would I say, well, hello, if I wasn't actually recording?
I don't know.
I'm talking to you guys. I'm talking to the people.
What you're doing, Gary.
All right. Well, hello to the people. Please forgive Justin. Welcome to Cinema Shock, the podcast exploring the stories behind your favorite cult and genre films. I am your co-host, Gary Horne.
Hey, I'm co-host Justin Bishop. I knew we were recording the whole time. Don't worry about
it was a bit. That's what it was.
And we're joined today by a writer you guys may have heard of. He also does some stand-up comedy. He also hosts a podcast called Computer Resume. It's a podcast that explores the entirety of Star Trek in chronological order. It's a big hit on all the podcast platforms. Welcome to the show, Mr. Todd A. Davis.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
I'm super happy for your success, Todd. I think I was looking at the charts. It's like, what, number 3 now in Star Trek podcast hosted by Todd?
Yeah. That sounds about right.
The third most popular Star Trek podcast hosted by a Todd.
Yep.
Welcome to the show, Todd. Anyway, hey guys,
if that guy from Scrubs, the Todd, actually starts a Star Trek, if he actually starts a Star Trek podcast, I'm fucked.
Oh yeah, it would be way better, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, guys, this is week 3, right? Week 3 of our Tobe Hooper series, The Tragedy of Tobe Hooper. How are you guys enjoying it so far? Gary?
I was going to say, you might as well throw to me on that one. I'm having a good time. I'm a fan of Tobe Hooper's. And more so than I even realized. I had never seen Eaten Alive. I knew I liked Texas Chainsaw, but it's one of those movies I like more every time I see it. I appreciate it more. And even this week's movie, I'm all right with.
I've really enjoyed listening to interviews with Tobe Hooper because he is the most chill human being on the planet.
Nice.
He really is. Like, he gives not a single fuck. Like, you can just tell, like, in every interview, he just like doesn't want to be here. It's like, I'll talk about this, but I'm not going to be very enthusiastic about it. I love it. I really love him. I think, but by all accounts, he's also like the sweetest dude. Everyone who's been on set with him. I mean, I know we talked about the people on Texas Chainsaw thinking he was kind of out there, but everyone else talks about how sweet he is and how nice of a dude he is.
I was watching one today, as a matter of fact, that as he gets older, that smoker's voice really starts kicking in.
Oh yeah.
But somebody asked him about the Texas Chainsaw remake, and I love he's so chill. Even like the joke, so he says this thing, and the people it's just like silent, like they're not sure if respectfully they should laugh or not. But what it is they're asking him about the remake of Texas Chainsaw, and he's like, yeah, I watched it. There was, I guess the best way to tell you is there's a scene where the camera is following behind Jessica Biel, and it's a close up on her ass. And, it's Jessica Biel. And I would pay for the ticket just for that shot. But everybody's just like kind of quiet. He's like, but anyway, the context of it wasn't the same, and I think that was its problem. All right, Tobe,
that's
kind of dig you.
I love him. So anyway, so the success of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just to give you guys a little recap on some stuff we've talked about on the last 2 episodes, that success led to a 3-picture deal with Universal Pictures for Hooper and his collaborator Kim Hinkle But that studio contract would not quite pan out the way that the filmmakers had hoped. First, as we discussed last week, they had to fulfill their agreement to make Eaten Alive. But even after that, things never really panned out for them at Universal. And of course, with deals like the Universal one, just because you have a 3-picture deal doesn't mean that they have to make 3 movies with you. They don't have to make any movies with you. They are not contractually obligated to actually do anything. It's basically like a first look thing where if you're going to make a movie, they get first dibs at it, and then they can either decide to go with it or to pass. And sometimes they can even, if they pass, you can even go to a different studio. It just depends on how the contract is. But that's kind of what happened with them. And that the contract did end up getting their feet in the door of Hollywood, though, which is kind of what they were looking for. And it also led to a friendship with a very important collaborator, William Friedkin, who we discussed a little bit last week.
Yeah, the sad part here is this the last time that Hooper and Hinkle would work together was on Eaten Alive, because they started off, becoming friends and they tried together. But, when Eaten Alive didn't do so well, they'd keep trying for a bit by doing what you're supposed to do and not letting the film's failure distract you. They tried to just focus in on working on other stories. And they started showing some to William Friedkin, who, like you said, they were really tight with, and they got lots of encouragement from Universal execs during the time. Then one morning, Friedkin invites Hooper and Hinkle to the screening for his new movie, Sorcerer. And so they all attend in the afternoon with literally the whole room other than them are just Universal executives. So to hear Hinkle tell the story at the end of the screening, that they're all attending, there was just utter silence. This is his quote: "Utter silence. No one spoke. Everyone just filed out. It was so cold, just an utter disaster." So Billy Friedkin just kind of disappeared overnight, and we were left without any support there on the lot.
Sounds like one of my first times doing stand-up. Jesus.
But yeah, I mean, he's just gone, just immediately. William Friedkin's out. And this still didn't stop them, by the way. They worked on and they found a couple of properties and started pitching them to Universal. Hooper's favorite was based off a fairly unknown novel called First Blood. And Hooper loved that story.
That First Blood?
That First Blood. And, yes.
I cannot imagine a Tobe Hooper First Blood. Or maybe
yes.
I can. I don't know. It probably would have been awesome.
It's interesting. It's an interesting idea, but it was definitely that First Blood, the one that would later, revitalize Sylvester Stallone for the rest of his, career. And Hooper loved the story. He really wanted to adapt it, but he was not getting a response from the studio. According to him, quote, "I didn't realize at the time that I'd already been pigeonholed as a genre director." This is when the realization hit that once Friedkin was gone, to quote Joe Bob Briggs's obituary for Hooper, he said, their 3-picture deal was now a 0-picture deal. The contract was just allowed to expire and they were left out in the cold.
Yeah. So things were not looking great. So they had the disappointment of Eaten Alive, which, as we know, was not really the follow-up to their instant classic Texas Chainsaw that they wanted. And then they go through all this, as many directors do, a bunch of hit and misses. Things are not looking great. And for Hooper or Hinkle, and I think Hinkle at this time moved back to Texas. I think he just, after their contract expired, he just left and went back to Texas. And I think he continued to maybe teach at University of Texas or something along those lines. But he's not really in the picture in Hooper's career from here on out.
They don't work together. I think they stick together and try for a little bit longer. And then when this movie we're talking about today comes up, basically he tries to get Hinkle on, but they're pretty dead set. The studio is on the writer they've already had work out the script. And so they won't hire him. And then Hinkle ends up, my understanding is he ends up working on junk stuff for a while. He actually had a story in the Texas Chainsaw article that Joe Bob Briggs works, where he's like, I got one job where I had to adapt a novel. And so I adapted that novel into a screen or a film. And then one of the producers, took that screenplay I wrote and adapted it into a novel that they put out under a different name and like sold it that way. And I didn't have the rights to it, and I couldn't do anything about it, except then they like basically offered him the job to adapt that novel into a screenplay later on. And he's like, what the fuck is going on here?
It's so strange. And Hinkle, he doesn't just disappear. Like he continues as like a producer, even up till now, mostly producing Texas Chainsaw related properties. He actually directed part 3, the next or the Leatherface, right? That's that one.
The one with Matthew McConaughey. He does Matthew McConaughey.
The Next Generation. That's the fourth
Generation.
one, right? Yeah. So he did that, and then he would produce all the remakes and everything.
But you're right. I mean,
early 2000s.
At this time, like Hooper did fall in love with LA. Like you can see that in all of his stuff. Like that he talks about it. He was enamored with the lights and the stars and just there was something about it that drew him to it. He was interested in it and just liked the area. But Hinkle he was kind of done, and
he was homesick. He wanted to get back to Texas. So Hooper starts prepping this low budget sci-fi horror film called The Dark for a producer named Edward Montoro. This guy he's another exploitation movie huckster, not unlike Marty Rustam, who produced Eaten Alive. Montoro was responsible for releasing all kinds of like exploitation and B movies in the 70s and 80s, stuff like Day of the Animals and Grizzly, these Jaws ripoffs. Here's a fun side note. I started looking into this guy because I don't know, these exploitation producers are always super interesting to me because they're usually just skeezy a lot of times, or like they just have really interesting lives. So in the mid 80s, Montoro's production company was on the verge of collapse due to some poor financial decisions and some issues surrounding a film of theirs called Great White that came out in 1981. And it was released internationally, but when it tried to be released in the US, its release got blocked because the filmmakers were accused of plagiarizing Jaws, because it's very much a Jaws ripoff. Then the final film that he produced, a movie called Mutant, did really poorly, and he had a pending divorce settlement that he was facing. So things are looking really bleak for Montoro. So he embezzles over $1 million from his company's bank account and then vanished, never to be seen again. And to this day, nobody knows where he is. It's thought that he moved to Mexico and changed his name, but he disappeared. Nobody even knows if he's still alive now. Yeah.
Just completely gone?
New podcast. So we're announcing our spinoff.
Searching for Edward Montoro. It'll be like that. It'll be like that Richard Simmons podcast.
Instead, though, we end up at the end being like hollowed out packages for cocaine, just smuggling it over the border.
Of course, this has nothing to do with Tobe Hooper. They did not work together, but I don't know. I went down that rabbit hole and it was wild, and I thought that everyone else needed to know about that.
Well, side note real quick, though, on that is just that you mentioned he also was behind Grizzly, and I just watched Grizzly not too long ago, and that's as much of a Jaws ripoff as I've ever seen. Like, it is literally Jaws in the forest. There's guys, like, every role, like Hooper and Brody and Quint, like, there are those guys, but chasing a bear. And it's just,
Did you watch Grizzly too?
I haven't seen Grizzly 2 yet. I keep wanting to watch it. I just forget about it. But anyway, I guess I was just thinking, like, when you said that about Great White, and I'm like, what is it with people in this? It's not like, how like you'll hear like the Nickelback songs are all the same and like they just have the same thing. So they're like just repeating their success with the same chords or whatever. It's like, I don't know. I'm just trying to picture these guys in the movie studios being like, God damn it, why is this movie not working? Like, we're using the same shit. People love this shit. We saw it.
So Hooper ends up abandoning The Dark after only 4 days of principal photography over disagreements with Montoro over what direction the film should take. And he was replaced by director John Bud Cardos, who's the guy behind the William Shatner classic, Kingdom of the Spiders. I say classic only semi-sarcastically because Kingdom of the Spiders is kind of awesome. Not good, but kind of awesome.
You should, but we got to put some air quotes around that.
Yeah, we'll do a William Shatner movie, like his weird post Star Trek career.
Yeah,
we'll do a series on that. We'll call it Holy Shat or something, and it'll be a big hit for us.
Well, no, we have to. I don't know if you just came up with that on the spot, but damn it, that needs to be a thing.
So great.
But The Dark, once it was released in 1979, was a disaster. Mostly because at the last minute, the producers, Montoro among them, decided that instead of being about a murderous child, because it was initially about this murderous child, maybe autistic, I don't know. Instead of being this murderous child, it should be about a murderous alien. And they changed this once the movie was about to be done shooting. So they just added an 8-foot alien into the finale and then went back to previous murder scenes and superimposed laser beams in them.
Okay.
And here's what Roger Ebert had to say about The Dark. Is that this is without a doubt the dumbest, most inept, most maddeningly unsatisfactory thriller of the last 5 years. Ooh. It's really bad. So bad indeed that it provides some sort of measuring tool against which to measure bad thrillers. Oh. So
here's the problem, though, is that makes me want to see it more.
It really makes me want to see it, honestly. But leaving the film, my point behind going into all that detail about a movie we're not talking about today is that leaving that was probably a good career move for Tobe Hooper in the long run. Like having had done Eaten Alive, which did not go well, and following up with this movie might have just destroyed his career completely. But that still left the question, what was Hooper's true follow-up to TCM going to be? Because Eaten Alive had not been it. Obviously, we talked about that. That was not like quite the sophomore run that he wanted it to be. But then finally, in the summer of 1979, things started looking up for Hooper, and he was finally given the chance to work on a film that might live up to his potential. That movie, it's the movie we're talking about today, Salem's Lot.
Ben Mears has been away too long. And now at last, he's come home.
My men fought at Valley Forge.
Daddy, come back safe.
Home to the childhood memories, to the old familiar faces, to a life unmolested by time. Home to Salem's Lot. A town too good to be true. Something is happening. Something terrible.
You're not leaving Salem's Lot, are you?
I'm not leaving. Don't you understand what's happening?
Do you?
Yes, I do. It's in the Marston house. Good evening.
Stephen King, the best-selling author of Carrie and The Shining, takes you on a startling journey to Salem's Lot.
I'm sorry, guys. I was well, you should be sorry, Todd.
I was gonna say, excuse me.
I was trying to look up The Dark on IMDb, and so that just I will say, if I have to do like The Dark and it doesn't initially come up, and then I have to click on search all title results and then finally get there, it's like page 4 of Google search. Like you're
well,
like,
The Dark is also
here?
like the most generic title for a movie of all time.
Yeah, that's true.
Along with Eaten Alive, honestly. So 1976, Brian De Palma's adaptation of the Stephen King novel, Stephen King's debut novel, Carrie, introduced audiences to the author's work. The film was a huge success, both critically and commercially. It made both Stephen King's and honestly De Palma's career and set off a string of bids for the next King book to be adapted. And at the time of Carrie's release, there was only one other option, and that was Salem's Lot, which was published in 1975. The book is significantly longer than Carrie at nearly 450 pages. Carrie is like less than 200 pages, probably the shortest standalone novel that King has ever written. But Salem's Lot being so long made adapting it much more difficult. So Warner Brothers would end up purchasing the rights to the novels, but the length and complexity of the novel proved difficult to develop. Unlike Carrie, which primarily focuses on a single character, Carrie, and then her mother, and then a few friends in the high school, Salem's Lot, like a lot of other King works, is about an entire community. It's a sprawling story with all these little side stories and subplots and all this stuff that doesn't really lend itself to a movie. So the question was, how do you fit all of that into a 2-hour movie? That's kind of what Warner Brothers is going through for a couple of years on this. And Tobe Hooper himself was even attached to the project kind of early on, working under William Friedkin. Actually, William Friedkin was attached as a producer and was going to get Tobe to do it. But that didn't last very long. Of course, we'll get to how he gets reattached here in a minute. But they were having trouble because a satisfactory script could never really be written because of the size of the book. And of course, 450 pages compared to, Stephen King novels now is on the shorter side. But at the time, I mean, a 450 page novel is still a lot.
When he was messing around with it, I saw stuff from him that said he had seen like screenplays adapted down to like, they would be like 3 hours, 2.5 hours, something like that. He had seen it be toyed around with, but that it just got to this point of like, when you're asking for 3 or 4 hours for a movie, which just for the reasons you outlined there, I mean, just because this is dealing with families and it's not doing it justice to like talk about a whole town's worth of people. You can't give all the characters room to breathe if you're trying to give this thing down to an hour and a half or something.
Because I mean, the book is called Salem's Lot. It's not called like the vampire of Salem's Lot. It's about the town and the people in the town and the way that this evil presence is affecting all of them. Right. So how do you fit that into a movie? So as a result of these issues that they're having, trying to get this adapted, the project kind of bounced around to several different writers, including Larry Cohen, who had done It's Alive, and Sterling Silliphant, who had done Village of the Damned back in 1960. Directors were announced at several points during its development, including Larry Cohen as well, and George Romero. I think we actually discussed Romero's involvement briefly way back in episode 2 of this podcast when we talked about Martin, because remember, they offered it to him because you're like, hey, you did this other movie about a small town vampire, so here's another small town vampire story, as Hollywood tends to do.
Yeah. I remember some of the stuff I saw this time around on that were just like similar issues. Like he just, he apparently dropped out. Like he just didn't think like people were going to give it enough room to make the actual movie.
Yeah, I think he ended up really leaving once it moved to television because he didn't think that the novel could withstand the restrictions of being on Netflix.
That's true. Yeah, I did see
and
that.
And George Romero was coming at this point in his career. He would have been coming right off of probably Dawn of the Dead,
Right.
So like an ultra gory movie. And then how am I going to go into working in television?
It's a weird dance that Hooper did with this screenplay though, or this property, because according to Hooper in like the commentary I was watching and stuff, when he first came to LA, he was courted, he said, by Universal and Warner Brothers. And he of course chose Universal. Oddly though, he says it was like Salem's Lot was something he was a fan of. And
the book.
Yeah. The book. And, the Universal execs during this time he was in Universal had initiated, like helped introduce him to the property, like to like him and Friedkin to Salem's Lot as being a possible thing, like making the right connections and so on. He and Friedkin were like really into it. Hooper says he dug Salem's Lot because he never cared for vampires before reading this book. And he said he always got like Frankenstein, but he never understood Dracula. But in Salem's Lot, Stephen King seemed to like capture how much of a monster the vampire is, as opposed to a story like Dracula. But anyway, Hollywood's a really shifty place. And he said he just finally kept getting told, like, some people in Universal set this up, but then later on, like mid-level execs in Universal would be like, this is not going to happen, or not everybody is going to sign off on this. Like it will just stay in limbo for forever. So he said he just was like, at a certain point, you have to let it go and say, I got to move on. I got to move on and do what I got to do.
Yeah. Then we get a guy named Richard Kobritz who comes in. Richard Kobritz was a young producer who had just had success with a made-for-TV horror movie called Someone's Watching Me. Have you ever seen this movie, Gary?
I have not seen this.
Well,
yeah, I mean, I know who it's by,
John Carpenter,
but I've never seen it. Yeah,
it's directed by John Carpenter. It's actually the movie he made right before Halloween. He shot it right before Halloween, although it actually aired about a month after Halloween's initial release in November of 1978. But Someone's Watching Me had been a ratings knockout. Like it was like made for TV movies were very, very big in the 1970s. And there's a whole subgenre you could go down talking about made for TV horror movies of the 70s, because it was a big thing. And Someone's Watching Me was very successful, and Richard Kobritz was eager to repeat that success. So he came on to the kind of, at this point, stalled Salem's Lot project. And he proposed that the made-for-TV format would probably work best for it, because, and when he said that, he's like, what we need to do, we need to put this on TV, but we don't need to do it as like a made for TV movie like we did with Someone's Watching Me. This needs to be a mini series that runs for 4 hours so that you could really encompass the entire story. That's what the studio decided to go with. And Kobritz now has to find a director, and he starts screening horror movies, looking for a director that kind of pops out. He was reportedly really unimpressed with Phantasm, which had just come out.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer. I mean, can you imagine a Don Coscarelli directed Salem's Lot?
It would be weird. Yeah. I mean, I feel like he's got the feel for something like that. Like it could work. Yeah. He also apparently thought that Larry Cohen, which I thought was interesting. I just saw something from Hooper at some point. I read that Hooper said he thought that the Larry Cohen script was garbage. That was his quote. Like,
that's unfortunate. I don't know anything about that script, but I'm a big Larry Cohen fan. But so once Kobritz watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, he knew that this is my guy. This is who we got to get to do this movie. So once again, Tobe Hooper is involved in this project. And at the time that Salem's Lot is offered to him, Hooper was just on the verge of signing on to direct a low-budget quickie called the Guyana Massacre. And I don't know much about this movie. I tried to see if it had been made, and I couldn't find any evidence that it had. And I don't know for sure that it has anything to do with Jim Jones and the Jonestown Massacre, because that took place in Guyana. But I have to guess that it did, right? I don't know what else a movie about
well,
lucky
I watched the commentary, and it 100% was about Jim Jones and the
it
Jonestown
was about
Massacre.
Jim Jones. Okay.
Yeah, he talks about it a little, just saying that at this point he was in Rome, and there were producers there that were trying to make this movie. And he said that he got really uncomfortable actually reading the stuff they had down for what they wanted to do. He said it was darker than dark, was his quote. And he said he kind of didn't want anything to do with it, which is fun coming from Tobe Hooper. But,
this is too dark for the guy who made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
What really sealed it for him, though, is he said then the death threats came. He said his agent kept calling and said, "You're getting death threats," and so is everybody who's even close to touching anything involving this. So he said, I had to get out of there as quickly as possible. And
death threats from whom?
I don't know. He didn't specify.
Maybe, I mean, a lot of people's family members died at Jonestown. So, maybe they thought they were exploiting. I mean, they were. These were Italian exploitation filmmakers. They were exploiting those people's deaths.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, lucky for him, Corbett's called. And and so, he said that meeting was fantastic.
Was his out.
Yeah. And that was his out. It was as fantastic as any meeting he'd ever had, because the guy, he's like, I've seen this before. Here's my vision. He said Corbett's immediately was like, yeah, me too. And was just and it was just he said he pitched it to him as this Hitchcockian film language. Examples he gave were characters walking towards the screen and their view shifts, and then it goes into a POV shot, and the look of the Marsden house with unfriendly angles, kind of like the Psycho house, etc. And so according to Hooper, then Corbett's was like, I kind of dig this. I got to make some calls. And I just thought this side story was interesting, because now I just want to go to this place. He said there's this place called Musso and Frank's in Hollywood, and I had never heard of this, but apparently a lot of directors and writers go there, and there's a special booth in the back where you wait next to a phone while you're eating. And he actually read Salem's Lot again while he was sitting there, and you just wait for the call to see if you got the job. And and then that's he got the call. Nice. And so he got
just
the
a bunch of very anxious looking filmmakers sitting around a room.
Right. Yeah.
Now, Judy, I'll have another cup of coffee. I know it's my 7th. Just bring it.
Bring the coffee, Judy. I just I thought that story was interesting. Just it makes me want to go there and us get a picture in the booth that Hooper would have waited in. But anyway, he said that, just to throw this in there, he said that Corbett's was absolutely the best producer he'd ever worked with. And he said that only time he'd ever intervene, and he would sometimes, but it would be to add shots, which for Hooper, he says worked fine for him, because he had never done TV before, and it was a different medium, and it's not a style he's familiar with. But he had a quote in that commentary that I liked. He just said, if all of my producers had been like Richard Corbett's, I would have had a blessed life. And
wow,
nice.
That's awesome. So Hooper signs on to do Salem's Lot after this meeting with Corbett's, and he signed on knowing that it was probably going to be a pretty difficult shoot. And it would prove to be the biggest challenge of his career to date. I mean, he had just 37 days to shoot. He had about 6 weeks of prep time, but he had just 37 days to shoot a 4-hour screenplay that featured more characters and more locations than Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Eaten Alive combined. And 14 of those days would be spent shooting on location in the small Northern California town of Ferndale. And the miniseries had a budget of about $4 million, which is a huge sum compared even to Eaten Alive, which, if you remember, itself was about 10 times the budget of Chainsaw. To put that in perspective, the cost of the Marston House was a mock-up exterior and then an interior set. The cost to build the Marston House was about the same for the entire budget of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Wow. Holy crap.
Which is crazy. Yeah, to think about.
And the Marston House had to be built because they could not find a suitable house, one that resembled the house from the book, in this little town of Fernsdale. So they essentially built a facade. Production designer Mort Rabinowitz, he designed it. It's this facade that goes over like an already existing house that's up on the hill, so that it had that looming look, over the town that they wanted. And then to make matters even more complicated, when Hooper was shooting this, he had to create 2 versions of the film. One had to be suitable for network television, and it had to be able to be given a pass by standards and practices at CBS. And the other, with more graphic violence, would be created for a theatrical release in Europe. So he's essentially making 2 different versions of the same movie at the same time, which is kind of nuts to think about.
Yeah, that you have to know that there's a way to edit this into 2 different movies.
Yeah. And one is much shorter than the other. Well, one's over an hour shorter than the other one.
Right.
So the rush production schedule required Hooper to knock out something like 30 to 40 camera setups every single day. That's insane.
Holy
I mean,
crap.
that's a pace that kind of pace would be hectic for even the most seasoned of directors. And this is the guy who's making his first studio movie, essentially, because Eaten Alive was a pretty small production. And this is his first time working for like a big Hollywood studio.
The crazy part with Hooper is like, to hear him talk about it, is that it's a thing I don't have, because I get like, I have trouble compartmentalizing things. And so I was watching some stuff of him talking about how he got through some of these studio things, that he's like, I just don't, he's like, I have a list, but I'm always good at being like, I don't know what's on the rest of that list. I have this thing I have to get done. And if I'm looking at that, I can't pay attention to this. So all of my focus immediately goes on complete this as quickly and best as possible. And he's like, and then we just move. And so like he's like, I've probably learned sometimes throughout when I get in trouble for like, things pushing against time. But he has this ability to, it seems like, to focus in on what he's supposed to get done. That house, he talks about the Marston House, that they had like somebody in Universal or somewhere, or Warner Brothers, like, come on and be like, we've got this perfect spot on top of the hill. It's going to be amazing. And then they go and look at it, and then he's just like, there's a house here. And so like, we thought like you found the perfect spot where we could have a house here. And now there is a house here. And so he said somebody in like one of the production team, he says, just goes in and there's a family like living in the house, and he goes in and convinces the family to let them build the Marston House over their house. And he says, so they do, they build the outside of the Marston House, everything you see, the interior shots, some of the stuff they do. He's like, the whole time we were filming, and she says was like 3 or 4 days of the filming, I think. But he says there's a family like living in a house inside of the house we're shooting in. And he's like, and the weirder part is never saw them. Like they never came out, never like you never saw anybody going out or leaving or anything like that. They were just
probably
in there.
afraid they didn't want to mess up a shot.
Yeah. But so, yeah, I don't, that's just crazy. And with Hooper, the other thing is too, we've learned with Eaten Alive and with Texas Chainsaw. He seems to be like really one of these guys. He has a vision in mind, so he's been like normally telling people to just trust me on this, like let's film this stuff, and he knows he can fix or like get it together in editing. But he really credits a guy, Carol Sachs, in this one, who is was the editor for Salem's Lot, and says that this guy was just incredible, like double time, like what he'd ever been able to do, and just super fast and like cut that down. Because he died right after this because he also was doing a side project, like going into nuclear plants and filming in there with like a 16 millimeter camera, and he would like run into areas where you're not supposed to be and like film stuff. And
shit.
Yeah, he's like, he was sick this whole time and he was dying, and he just said
dying of like radiation poisoning.
Right. It's like he didn't say specifically radiation poisoning, so I don't want to misquote him, but he just said he was sick and died shortly after. But
that's crazy.
Yeah.
So Kess is the main villain in this film, which is Barlow's henchman, Mr. Straker, is a guy who's probably the film's most prestigious actor, Mr. James Mason. He's a legendary actor.
Mason.
Thank you, Todd. I like the idea of James Mason just saying his own name.
Anytime
he hears it,
he just has to say, that's actually, I wish we'd have thought of that as a bit beforehand.
You guys have no idea. Kat is furious at me because I watched this movie on Friday and I've been walking around saying things as James Mason around the house. He's like,
she doesn't love it.
Go record the damn podcast already. God, get it out of your
James Mason, if you're not familiar with him, he's a legendary actor. He'd appeared in films by the likes of Alfred Hitchcock. He's in North by Northwest, Stanley Kubrick's Lolita, and his wife, whose name is Clarissa K. Mason. She was actually cast in the film as well. She plays Marjorie Glick in the film.
Yeah, apparently everybody loves this guy. Which, I mean, why wouldn't you? He's brilliant, but Hooper talks a lot about his dark sense of humor too that was really unexpected because he's like classical, it seems like, but he loved the idea that he seemed to relish a darker role, like just these, like the points in the movie where he just seems to have a lot of smiles and he's pleased with himself and this sort of thing. He says even
to the master.
And Hooper has a weird sense of humor, so I think they clicked on that because he even tells the story about what's Mason's having to drive a car and he's taking a turn, but he'd never driven the car before, and he cuts it close and he bounces off the curb in the shot. And they're like, well, maybe we should redo this. And Mason's like, well, my boy, if we can't, then you could always just say there was a baby there.
Shit.
So opposite James Mason as the film's hero was David Soul, who had played Hutch from the original Starsky and Hutch TV series. And man, David Soul also has a very interesting background. He had started, before his success as an actor, he had gained attention by appearing on the Merv Griffin show. This was about a decade before this movie, late 60s. He was on the Merv Griffin show as a singer in a mask called The Covered Man. He would come out and sing with a mask on because he was like, I want people to know me for my music and not as, because of what I look like. And then that same year, this is about 1967.
It's the Masked Singer before the Masked Singer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that same year, he made his TV debut in Flipper, the Flipper TV series, and then signed a contract with Columbia Pictures, which was followed by a lot of guest appearances and TV shows, and which included the second season episode of Star Trek called The Apple.
Nice. Okay. Well,
Yeah,
that's
so
not the only one we'll get out of this, but
toss it to Flipper, oh boy.
But his TV credentials definitely helped him get this job. I mean, he was Starsky and Hutch was huge.
It was a big deal.
Yeah, he was a star.
Yeah, so he had TV star power. Hooper says he was great, but like it would definitely be a curse sometimes because like this was the first time he'd ever worked with somebody that when they're in Ferndale, walking from a set to a trailer, like he's walking along with him and trying to talk with him about something, and there are like mobs of people like trying to get to this guy. And he was like, this is the first time I've worked with like that kind of celebrity on set. It was just was really crazy.
And other members of the cast included Bonnie Bedelia, who is John McClane's wife in Die Hard.
Yeah, she is. She's also a Culkin, by the way.
She's a Culkin?
Yeah,
she's a Culkin.
Wait,
Yeah.
and in what way?
She's like the sister of Macaulay and Kieran's
She's
dad.
their aunt.
Yeah, she's their aunt.
Interesting. So anyway, she plays Susan. Lance Kerwin plays Mark Petrie. Kenneth McMillan, who is in David Lynch's Dune, is the only other thing I know him in. He's the constable. He's really fun in this. Julie Cobb as Bonnie. Fred Willard as Larry Crockett. I love seeing Fred Willard.
God, he looks like a kid.
Yeah, he is.
It's so young. I've been watching Modern Family, and like we
have too.
Yeah, and
is he on there?
He is. He plays Phil's dad. So he's in several episodes of Modern Family, and but by the last season of Modern Family, you can see him getting more old and frail.
Yeah, I remember seeing him in that Netflix sketch comedy series that came out last year, and he was looking pretty old at that point.
Yeah, but here he was just starting out. Like he had done he had done stuff, but I think Hooper said that he had Corbett had seen him in this show Fernwood Tonight, and he was
oh yeah, I've watched clips of that show. There's a really great it's like an interview show, right? Like a kind of late night talk show kind of thing,
right?
There's a really great interview where him and the other guy who's in his co-host interview Tom Waits, and it's pretty hilarious.
That's awesome. Yeah, he said he saw him on there, and just like he knew, like right when he saw him, he's like, he would be perfect as like this real estate like skeezy guy. Like he just seems like he'll have it. And Hooper, by the way, says that Fred Willard and David Sewell actually became like lifelong friends. Like they were friends for years up until the end. So but yeah, I just thought that was kind of cool. Julie Cobb, just so we can add to this, she plays Yeoman Leslie Thompson in Star Trek, the original series, in the episode By Any Other Name.
It's also season 2.
Yeah, she's the first red skirt to die.
Yeah, the only in the original series.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, actually, the only.
Yeah, she's the only.
Her ex-husband is James Cromwell,
Yep.
who was later on in Star Trek. So
and she later became known as one of the stars of Charles and Charles. So that's like kind of her main claim to fame. But yeah, she's another Star Trek alum.
Oda Weasel, or whatever his real name was, and Ava, they were actors, Elisha Cook Jr. and Marie Windsor, and they were cast together as husband and wife as a reference to the Stanley Kubrick movie, The Killing.
Yeah, 56. Which they're both in. Elisha Cook Jr. is also in Rosemary's Baby.
Oh yeah, that's right.
He's one of the Satanists. Yeah, and I love the cast of this movie. This is the first. I think this is really the first film. I mean, it's only the second filmed adaptation of a Stephen King novel, but this is the first one that has that like Stephen King New Englander spirit.
Oh yeah,
because most of the small towns in King's books, like Castle Rock, Jerusalem's Lot, or it's just called Salem's Lot in the movie, but Jerusalem's Lot in the book is filled with like a bunch of kind of working class, like blue collar types, thick Maine accent, especially like the constable. He's really laying that accent on. I love it. He's second only probably to what's his name, Judd from the original Pet Cemetery.
Right. Well, one of the things that Hooper seems to respect about King, and I think you can tell from this that he really does respect Stephen King and what he's doing, but he talks in some stuff I've seen about how Stephen King didn't take time, like wherever he grew up at and whatever he was and like how he developed his writing style. He never took time to like explain himself or like why. I'm trying to think of the words he used, but he was just like, things just are the way they are. And there's no apologies. There's no like extra explanation needed. It's just like things work because he says they work. And just, he really appreciated that about Stephen King. And I think you get that from this thing, this like New England town. It's set. These people just take on these roles. And there was some discussion about, if you see Texas Chainsaw to Eaten Alive to this movie, Tobe Hooper almost seems you might not, I mean, to me, know that this is the same director.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's stylistically very different.
Yeah.
And I've seen interviews with him talking about that, where it's just like he just says, like, it was in that spirit of the Stephen King thing that we just did this one because we're honoring what's on the page, and it's like the most well-oiled cast I've ever had, and like the budget and he's like, I don't know. He's like, maybe there's parts of it. Maybe there's the fire lit under my ass for like the speed at which we got to get it done or whatever. He's like, maybe there's different parts of my vision coming out. He's like, but I don't, he's basically saying like, I don't know that was ever intentional. It just circumstances were different. So like a different thing happened.
Yeah. I saw that James Mason insisted on oiling the cast himself.
Right. Which seems like something he'd request. Like that's a part of his. That's part of.
That's dedication.
That's in his rider.
Yeah, it's and really it adds to the project. It just the whole vibe changes, and you really hit your stride once you're oiled.
Well, to clarify, what he's talking about there is that this is like these are working actors. These are all experienced, like steadily working actors, as opposed to every other movie that Tobe Hooper's ever done up until this point, where it's been like thrown together cast of people just hoping to get a job.
Yeah,
right.
And he strikes oil sometimes, with strikes oil. But
was like, did you know James Mason actually drilled for the oil himself?
But like someone like Robert Englund, you get lucky. And find someone who is looking for a job who's also really, really good. But in this one, he's got all these great little, like, they're character actors, but they are mostly character actors who've worked in television.
Well, and Eating Alive, not to take away from those people, but those were also people he like grew up idolizing, or but their careers were like on the other side, I guess.
Yeah. And I like that the length of this, because they did go with the miniseries route, they're able to let these little side stories breathe, because the side stories in this are pretty compelling. You've got like George Zunza's character, who's trying to catch his wife cheating with her boss. That's a fun little side story.
It is. And intense. It adds like a different layer of intense.
It adds a different layer of intensity. It adds a little bit more friction, and it adds color to the story and kind of fleshes out this town. But it also factors into the A plot of the movie, because he gets a couple of other guys to take his truck to pick up Barlow's crate. And then one of them becomes a pretty important vampire later on in the story. But it also kind of speaks to the idea that's, I guess, kind of further explored in the book, but a little bit in the movie, that there's something truly wrong in this town. Like there's like a rotting heart at the center of this town. And it could be because of this kind of inherent evil that Ben Mears talks about, that sort of inhabits the Marston house. I mean, granted that's an interesting question for the movie to raise, because there are lots of small towns that don't have a vampire living in the middle of them, where spouses cheat on each other, so is it a result of that, or is it just like human nature? It's really adds an interesting element to the movie.
Yeah, like how much evil in this whole thing is because of the actual vampire that showed up, or
is it just because people are just generally kind of shitty? And then casting the role of the Nosferatu-like master vampire, Kurt Barlow, was an actor by the name of Reggie Nalder. And this guy is incredibly interesting. Nalder was an Austrian actor. He got his start kind of working in cabarets, originally in Austria, but then he moved into cabarets in Paris in the 1930s. But he's most well known for his work in Hitchcock's 1956 version of The Man Who Knew Too Much, and as Barlow in Salem's Lot. These are kind of his most high-profile movie gigs. This guy,
also, he was also in Star Trek: The Original Series at one point.
He was, yeah. He is in another season 2 episode called Journey to Babel. He played an Andorian ambassador.
I guess there was just like a thing where it's like, if you're on TV right now, we got jobs for you. Just like, we'll just keep moving you around.
Yeah. But this guy, you start looking into his past, and like he's kind of purposely keeping a lot of his past a secret. I don't know why, but it makes him an interesting character to me, just because like he's so mysterious. And
mafia ties.
Well, he's in Austria, so probably not.
Oh, go ahead.
One of the things
Did you hear that Austrian mafia? Justin Bishop in Greenville, South Carolina doesn't think you're shit.
Yes, do something.
Yeah.
Well, one of the parts of his past that's shrouded in mystery is the source of these burns that scarred the lower third of his face. If you look at him without makeup on, from like his mouth down is pretty badly burned. And it's a feature that gave him a very distinct look, obviously, and pretty much guaranteed that he would always be cast as a villain. And it gave him the nickname, the face that launched 1,000 trips. And I do not know what that means. What does that name mean? I don't know, but that's what he's known as.
I guess you'd have to ride it to find out.
It's a horrible James Mason oiling accident.
And in the years between his appearance in The Man Who Knew Too Much and Salem's Lot, he appeared in movies like The Manchurian Candidate. He was actually in The Manchurian Candidate at the request of Frank Sinatra. And he's in Dario Argento's The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. So the guy's worked with some really cool filmmakers.
Nice.
Yeah, he just looks like even Hooper's just like, oh, he just immediately looked like Nosferatu. Like,
he just looks like a vampire. Yeah,
it's just that's easy to use this guy. I did find the old quote from him that I thought, since he's passed away, we'll honor him with a quote that aged well, and that's not sarcasm. This is back from, I don't even remember what year this was, but this is well before anybody would have thought this same thing. He said, "I hate working with Bill Cosby. He is a pig. I met him in Rome where I did an episode of I Spy. Bill Cosby is rude, arrogant, and very untalented. He walked right by me on the set as if I was a piece of furniture. I tried to be polite, but he made it impossible." Wow. I was sort of like, wow, if you were around now, you would have seen your thoughts revealed on the public stage. And so just to pass that on to you, Reggie Nalder.
In order to play Barlow, Nalder had to emote under this heavy makeup that took like 2 hours to apply every single day. And when he talks about, he was interviewed about making this movie, he said, quote, "The makeup and contact lenses were painful, but I got used to them. I like the money best of all."
Yeah, he said, Hooper described it. He was like, it was just funny. Like he said he was always good spirits and all of that stuff, but yeah, just said there were so many like prosthetics going on with that guy. Just like you mentioned the contacts, but the nails. He said that like he'd just be in the middle of trying to do something serious and like his nails would fall off or something like that. Like it would just be like he was always losing nails. Like that was like a running gag on the set.
Well, the makeup effects were created by makeup artist Jack Young, whose previous credits had included The Brood and Apocalypse Now. And those were actually just his like most recent credits. Those are the movies he made like right before Salem's Lot. But Jack Young had been working since like the late 1930s as a makeup artist. He'd done movies like Murders in the Rue Morgue and Walking Tall. In fact, his first movie that he ever worked on, he was uncredited, but the first movie that Jack Young ever worked on as a makeup artist was The Wizard of Oz, where he applied the makeup to the Wicked Witch makeup to Margaret Hamilton.
Wow, that's
a hell of a movie to get your start on.
Yeah, a little bit of cinema history, like legendary cinema history.
Yeah, and with these glowing contact lenses, fangs, and this skull-like headpiece, the visual style of Barlow, I think, remains pretty iconic, but it was also one of the film's biggest divergences from its source material. See, I don't know if you guys have read the book. I haven't read it in many, many years, so I'm by no means.
I haven't. I mean, I looked up notes to find the differences, but yeah.
But it's generally the same story as King's novel, but it does take a lot of liberties with the material, with a lot of the characters being combined or sometimes deleted altogether, as have some of the novel's subplots. And Richard Kobritz was responsible for a lot of this. He added several changes to the script. The script was by Paul Monash. One of Kobritz's big changes was transforming Kurt Barlow from this cultured and completely human-looking villain into a speechless, demonic-looking vampire. When he was explaining this, and there's a really great issue of Cinefantastique magazine that came out right around the time of this movie, that the entire issue is basically devoted to Salem's Lot. And in talking to them, he said, we went back to the old German Nosferatu concept where he is the essence of evil and not anything romancy or smarmy or, the rouge-cheeked, widow-peaked Dracula. I wanted nothing suave or sexual because I just didn't think it'd work. We've seen too much of it. The other thing we did with the character, which I think is an improvement, is that Barlow doesn't speak. The reason he gives for not having Barlow speak in this version as opposed to the book is he says that like whatever voice you would give to Barlow, it would come across as either silly, like if you did like a Dracula voice, like a Bela Lugosi voice, it's going to be kind of silly, or if it's going to sound like something that's been done before. Like they toyed with the idea of, doing like Reagan in The Exorcist, like that demonic voice, but they're like, yeah, you've seen that. It's been done.
In hell.
I'm glad you went there. Yeah.
Thanks.
So
thank you.
Happy
Mr.
to make my
President.
contribution, fellas.
So they ended up making the Straker character a more important component of the story instead of having the vampire speak for himself. And a lot of King fans, they don't really like hardcore Stephen King fans didn't like that change in Barlow. And I mean, I can kind of give them that. It is a very different version of the character, but to me, I think that just like with Kubrick's version of The Shining, you kind of have to view the movie as a separate entity from the book and judge it on its own. Like Hooper's Barlow is very different from this like German count character that he is in the book, but it's an iconic movie character. Like that visual is striking, even, we're 4 decades beyond. And I think it just looks cool. And that first time that he pops up, that's a hell of a jump scare. It's really good. It's really well done.
Yeah, I think the only other changes they made for the book are probably some subplot involving molestation or kid orgy that producers are like, God damn it, Steve, chill.
There is no kid orgy in this.
James Mason was like, I'll get the oil.
I'm just saying, why don't you guys tone it down a little bit? It'll give us so much of a shit about sticking completely to the source material sometimes. Like sometimes there's things you don't want to portray on screen. Just fucking drop it.
And some things just work better in a movie than they work in a book, or vice versa. Another change that Kubrick's made was having the final confrontation with Barlow in the cellar of the Marston houses. In the book, it's in Eva Miller's boarding house where Ben Mears is staying. But they thought that they're like, if you're making a movie where you've got to have the confrontation with the main villain in like his lair, which makes a lot of sense, honestly.
Yeah.
And then they also moved Susan's death to the climax of the film to give it kind of more of an impact. And as Kubrick said, give the movie more of a snap ending.
I think Susan's death really occurred in Die Hard, where she appeared with that hairstyle, because she was her hair here was so much better. I don't know why the style in Die Hard was ever a thing, but
I think my mom had that hairstyle.
I think a lot of people's moms have that hairstyle. So it's just it is what it is. I will say the thing is with the character, I think one of the things that Stephen King did in Salem's Lot that it appears that Tobe Hooper got a lot out of was that Salem's Lot apparently kind of portrayed Barlow as more of a monster than human. And so like Dracula like danced on that edge and that sort of thing. So like it seemed like Hooper was more in favor of the Nosferatu style too, and Corbett's as well. Stephen King he seemed to be able to portray that in the book, but they felt like on screen you had to show it as well.
Yeah. Sometimes it's harder you have to visualize it because there's not all this internalization that you get in a book.
Exactly. Like I found this quote from Danse Macabre from Stephen King about the book. He said, this is his quote: "I decided I wanted to try to use the book partially as a form of literary homage. So my novel bears an intentional similarity to Bram Stoker's Dracula. And after a while, it began to seem to me what I was doing was playing with an interesting, to me at least, game of literary racquetball. Salem's Lot itself was the ball, and Dracula was the wall I kept hitting it against, watching to see how and where it would bounce so I could hit it again. As a matter of fact, it took some pretty interesting bounces, and I ascribe this mostly to the fact that while my ball existed in the 20th century, my wall was very much a product of the 19th. I thought that
That's
was
such a Stephen King quote.
It is. It is. And I thought it was worth reading, though, just so we give some credit to Stephen King on here's Stephen King's analysis of what he was trying to do with Salem's Lot. Back to what we were saying. Yeah, I think Hooper and Corbett really wanted to portray this thing as like, you've only got so much time, and like people can bitch all they want to. And fuck, man, they got 4 hours here or 3 hours or whatever it is to work with. Making this story works, cut them some slack that like, if you want this to be a film that you can watch, you got to work within the parameters. Sure, we all wish that people would just throw money at your favorite story and make it work however you wanted. But like you said, like with Kubrick, you're trying to make it for the screen. I don't know. I think with this one, especially, I got like more of appreciation for that. That I'm like, all of these characters, I'm like, I get it. There's probably like some more depth to these characters, but this has plenty of depth to these characters that it uses. And I'm trying to think of the wording, but they had it together on like who they used and how they used them.
Yeah, it was well thought out, the adaptation. I think that there is one glaring change for me, and that's the much smaller role that Father Callahan plays in the film.
That's true.
Callahan is a pretty major character in the book, and his character plays a lot into these themes of faith in the book. Mm-hmm. And he was an important enough character in that, and he's also like, he's a very complex character. He's a priest, but he's also he suffers from being an alcoholic. But he was an important enough character that he ended up being a main fixture in King's Dark Tower series later on. Like, he appears in multiple Dark Tower series books as a very important figure, actually. But here he's kind of a non-entity. Like, they go see the priest at one point, and then old Barlow pops his head up, and the priest, is kind of out of the story at that point. Like, he's barely in it.
You know what I think probably happened there? And this is speculation. I have no idea. But if you like asked me to tell you immediately, probably what it was is that the people didn't want to touch religion that much in the 70s. Like, they were
very probably true. I mean, it's at least on network TV, because this is The Exorcist has already happened.
You're right.
Network TV,
network television. Are you going to really test your faith in God versus the vampire guy,
right.
And lose?
And,
and that probably wouldn't go over too well. It's the same with he talks about with Fred Willard, the scene where he's cheating and he gets the shotgun on his chest and like moved up to his head, and I think that's like a decently intense scene. And very, I don't know, I love the dialogue there even too. It's like, see how much self-control you have. Like, imagine like if you just applied, he was just basically, it's like, it was funny. Right now you've got so much. But apparently in the book, it's like the shotgun's in his mouth, and they were like, "Oh, all right, let's not get crazy." And like Hooper's just kind of like in the commentary, like, I mean, although like the gun's like pointed at his head, like it'll blow his fucking head off. Like but in the book, he was like, I felt like it'd be more intense, like in his mouth, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
The filming on this ran from July to August of 1979 with Kobritz's blessing. And this, Gary kind of alluded to this earlier, but Hooper was able to do something that a lot of television directors at the time didn't do, which is to give it some film style. In essence, what I mean is that he shot Salem's Lot as he would a theatrical movie, using like film grammar. Not like a TV show, not like just these boring shot. It's like he's using some true film grammar here that you did not at the time. We take it for granted now, but at the time, that's not something you were seeing in a made-for-TV movie or in TV at all.
You mentioned taking this for granted, in case someone's listening doesn't really get the fact that like, hey, like TV and film are, walk closer, sometimes even hand in hand nowadays, but like the TV and film world were very separate back then. And,
absolutely. Yeah.
And there wasn't stuff like streaming services like Netflix, where if you had a big long series, you could do, 3, 4, 6 episodes and wrap it all up. This was kind of still a new thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. the decision to treat Salem's Lot like a film paid off. When the miniseries aired on November 17th and 24th, 1979, it was a ratings juggernaut. Critics loved it and audiences loved it. Audiences found it genuinely scary. And in the years following its broadcast, like, it has continued to be successful and it's gained a big cult following. People love this movie, even to this day. For a made-for-TV, miniseries to still be being talked about 40 plus years later is kind of staggering.
Well, and yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, it's shot like a film. You would never know. I think you can still throw this on right now and you would never know this was like a made-for-TV movie. I don't think,
except for the little commercial break.
Yeah,
like,
okay. You're right.
Parts,
You're right.
but,
There are those like weird pauses in between it and stuff like that. But like Todd said, I mean, it's important to know that this is a different time. I mean, this is a time where, like, the Beatles fucked shit up like a decade before. Like they were. You don't throw extreme violence and vampire. You want mama and daddy to be able to watch along with the kids in the living room. They're still not expecting this to get wild, like too wild, like Texas Chainsaw Wild or something like that. They're not expecting The Exorcist on screen, like for national television. This is a unique thing. So he's having to work within these confines, but yeah, man, I watched this movie and I think it still feels cinematic. Like it does. It definitely has that.
It does. I mean, there are moments where you get some production quality that feels a little TV showish, every now and then, but it's not in the way it's shot. It's honestly because of it's got TV lighting a lot of times. I think is the big thing to me, is that a lot of times which is a little more flat and a little less cinematic, but Hooper's still moving the camera and editing it the way that you would a movie. And I think this in many ways sets the stage for future King novels and their adaptations. The miniseries model would become a trend for a lot of King novels, like It and The Stand. His big, long stuff like that lends itself. Hell, even The Langoliers, a short story, was turned into like a 2-part miniseries. And honestly, the less said about The Langoliers, the better.
Yeah, that Night Flyer one with the vampire with like.
There's some really bad ones, but it's still happening. Because
I used to rent anything for the video store that said Stephen King on it.
Yeah, I mean, The Stand just got redone on CBS All Access as a miniseries.
Well, yeah, where I was even going with like that difference is like right now we can go to CBS All Access and we can watch Star Trek Discovery and somebody drops a fucking F-bomb and my old ass is like, can you say fuck on Star Trek? Like, did you just say fuck? It's like, I don't think you can do that. And so, and I am not a prude. I don't think. We make jokes about Pornhub.
It's funny that we discuss, the filmic style of this movie, which it does have, but it is kind of hard to see the Hooper style that we got with like Texas Chainsaw and Eaten Alive in this movie. That like hothouse, swampy Texas sensationalism, all that weird shit that you were getting in those movies. Like the look of Salem's Lot is pretty old fashioned, very unlike his previous films.
Well, I think you said that they were really going for that New England vibe, and nail on the head. I mean, I think they knocked it out of the park with that.
Well, I think maybe he's also going for that classic horror movie vibe because he's using a classic horror monster in the vampire,
Yeah.
Well, and of course, this is also being made very differently because this is unlike both of his previous films. This is a combination of both location and soundstage shooting.
What I think is amazing about it is like the absolute, like the parts that like execs, studio execs, I did air quotes there, that would be most concerned with. And I don't know why I did air quotes, by the way, because they are studio execs.
That's what they are.
Yeah. So they're not quote studio execs. Anyway, that is still calling back to my lack of ability to use air quotes. the things that are creepiest about this movie that I think would have impacted the youth of America watching this on national television in a miniseries are things like the fucking floating kid coming through the window that I'm that's goddamn creepy. That's pretty creepy.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think Hooper does manage to use like kind of he gets around the limits of the format and really create some genuinely creepy moments. And that's possibly the most memorable one is when little Ralphie Glick as a vampire floats into his older brother's bedroom. It's fucking creepy.
Yeah,
it really is.
And you know, what's funny is, hearing him talk about it, he says that like he spent a lot of time on the actors. Like he was trying really hard to be on the actors. And we talked about this before, but Tobe Hooper, by the way, if you get a chance to get the Blu-ray, listen to the commentary, he talks a lot about this, just like playing with soul and stuff like that he would say, like, he admits it. It's the first time I've seen anything with him where he admits it. He's like, when I'm on set, sometimes I want people to be uncomfortable. So I get in a bad mood and I make sure that they know I'm in a bad mood. And I get pissed off. We're behind. I get stressed. I got no time for anybody. And that makes them tense. It makes them sweaty. And he's like, that's part of what I do. Like he basically like outlines it. And he's like, but for this, knowing what we're doing this TV movie, I'm doing this a lot with these people. Like I'm working with the actors. Like I'm trying to make this happen. So then when we get to the scene we're talking about, he says, like, I want to get a crane. I want to develop a harness. Like, let's get this kid, like, float him through the window and stuff. He's like, I could do this. And he's like, the execs passed down notes that were like, you are on a tight schedule. You can't do this. Like, don't do this scene. And he said that he's like, no, I know exactly how to do this. Like, I could do this part. And they just didn't believe in it. They didn't believe in like what he said was like this practical stuff, this magic tricks on camera. He's like, but I knew I could do it. And he's like, so I did. He's like, I convinced Coberts, and he fought for me, and we got it. We got the harness. We set it up. We did the scene and stuff. And he was like, it's funny from then on. Constantly, like the notes we got were like, spend less time with the actors, do more floating kid stuff.
Well, it's funny, like for those who couldn't visualize what Gary was saying as far as how they're making that kid float, they're not using wires, which would kind of be the general way that people would do that, because Hooper didn't like the look of wires. He thought you could always tell when somebody was being hung from wires. So yeah, they used a swing dolly and attached a harness to it, and the kid's attached to that. So he's kind of floating more than being lifted, you know?
Right.
I mean, he is being lifted, but he's not being like lifted up by strings. And that's kind of how they made that effect work. And then they actually filmed it in reverse just to make it feel a little like more eerie.
I thought so. I was like,
yeah, you can see the smoke going backwards. Yeah. But it adds a cool effect to the scene. And it holds up really well. I think it plays really well.
Yeah.
The other scene that I love is it might be my favorite scene in the entire movie. If Gary, you like to do what's your favorite movie moment of this?
Yeah.
The floating vampire is up there, but the other one, the one for me, I think my favorite movie moment in this is towards the end in the finale.
I know what you're going to say.
And, but before I describe it, I will say that I feel like a lot of the movie feels pretty kind of chaste compared to Hooper's other work. But it also, once you get to the finale, you're like, this is what Hooper made this movie for this last act in the Marston house. Like, this feels like a Tobe Hooper movie. That house feels a bit like the Sawyer residence from Texas Chainsaw. There's taxidermied animals and fucking antlers everywhere and bones and shit. Like, everything's covered in an inch of dust. It's a pretty amazing from a production design standpoint, but it really is way grimier than you would like expect from a network production, network TV production.
Yeah,
but It does feel like Hooper, the entire movie, he was just waiting to get to like the last 40 minutes of this movie to just get into that grungy, dingy place.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and, the guy he uses there,
Mort Rabinowitz.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, he talks about him, and I lost his name, but he says that, you know, he loved like the Martian house is. He said if you want to compare it, the house that Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara build in Gone with the Wind, he's like, it is that house. Like the interior is designed completely around that.
That's crazy. That's so funny. So anyway, back to my favorite moment in this the climax of the film is that, okay, there's this sort of makeshift mausoleum like in the basement of the house, and I think this is partially why Kobertz's decision to move the finale to the Martian house as opposed to the book's boarding house is kind of genius. But in this mausoleum are all of Barlow's victims. And there's this moment where you see them in the background in like the darkness of this crawl space, slightly out of focus, and their eyes are glowing and they're crawling through the muck. And it is chilling and just dreadful. And I think it should honestly be counted among like the great horror movie moments. It is an incredible moment, and it's so creepy.
When that kid is leaning against the wall and Jeffrey Lewis is like crawling towards him, like in that open doorway, that's legitimately fucking terrifying.
It is. It is.
He like barely sees him in time and closes the door when they're trying to kill Barlow. It's like, no, that's on TV. Like that would have ruined my life. Like that would have. I can see why. I mean, even to this day, I can see why that works. Like that 100% works.
Because he's pretty far back and starts moving around. Like, I mean, he's crawling towards him for a while, and I mean, closer he gets, that higher the tension gets. And it's just like, oh man.
Yeah, it's really, I have to say that if the film has a flaw, it's, I think, the pacing of it, especially as a 2-part miniseries, because it's not that big a deal now, because I think the only version of this that most of us have access to is the 3-hour edit where it's edited as a single movie. Yeah. But in 1979, you're watching this over the course of like 2 nights, a week apart. That first half, the first 2 hours, or what would have been 2 hours with commercials, the first half is a bit of a slow build. It's all important stuff. It's character building. You're learning the people in the town, but there's really not any vampire stuff hardly until maybe the last like 5 or 10 minutes of that first half, and then it ends at the part where the little kid where they're in the graveyard and the little kid vampire bites the guy. And then it goes to like a freeze frame. Right. That was the end of part 1. But then the second half, okay, so you watch that and there was enough vampire shit at the end of that 2 hours to get you wanting to watch the next week. And then the next week, wall-to-wall vampire shit, like the entire second half. And obviously the fact that the first half doesn't have as much vampire stuff didn't keep people from watching the second half, because as we discussed, this was a major success and such a big rating success that CBS actually considered developing an ongoing Salem's Lot TV series, which I think it actually lends itself to pretty well. I think that's actually a really good idea.
Yeah. I think that would have worked.
I'd be curious to see that international cut that was released in European theaters, though, that's like an hour shorter, as I imagine it doesn't run into that same pacing issue.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, one of the things I love about it is I don't know. When I watched it, I didn't feel, I only felt the length of it so much just because I had to pee at certain points. But other than that, like I was kind of into it. Like I dug the atmosphere and the just the feel of the whole movie. And maybe that's just my lot in life. Like I just,
there's also those little like side stories that do keep you engaged, even when they don't involve vampires,
Yeah. And Tobe clearly he cared about the characters and enough so that you also cared about it. He also cared about, again, this is, just from seeing some stuff of him talking about it, just the idea of he cares about keeping you engaged. He doesn't want to reveal too much at the beginning
Yeah.
He believes in that. The more you have to think about it, the more that you are involved in it, as opposed to like you see everything and then it just like you can check in and out with whatever. So he definitely has that philosophy of like, if I show you Barlow now, then, you know, it is what it is. But like, if I make you think about what Barlow is, like what he could look like, who he is, like how is he impacting who could possibly be doing this thing? It means you're engaged, that you're at least thinking about that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I would like to propose a new, we like our little segments on this show. I'd like to propose a new segment where we get Todd's opinion called Todd's Take. Because
oh boy,
I'm just curious. Does
this need to come before or after Who Needs a Nap?
I don't know. Maybe during.
Oh man,
maybe during. It's hard to say, but let's go ahead and, since we've already talked about it, let's go ahead and do it now, and then we'll get into see who needs a nap. But Todd, let's hear your take.
Sure. To be honest,
you got 2 minutes. You're being timed.
Okay, you guys.
Not really. Just talk. I don't give a shit.
No, I think there was a big thought between the two of you that I was not going to dig this.
Well, you don't like anything so far that we've talked about with Tobe Hooper. So. that was a pretty good bet on our part.
That's fair. But I actually did kind of dig this. Yeah, I felt the pacing a little bit. I mean, you know, 3 hour plus is a long time to ask anybody to sit and, you know, and not move. But to be honest, yeah, I feel like it could have benefited from a little trimming, a little extra polishing off of some of those longer takes. I mean, but I mean, all that character stuff is important for you to care about these people. And I think I mentioned that in the first 2 chapters of the Tobe Hooper series, that I didn't really feel super connected to any of those characters. Totally felt more connected to these characters. Yeah, you know, the TV miniseries, you know, tends to suffer, or at least it did probably around this period of time, tends to suffer from the TV production. So it looks flatter, like you said. But I didn't really get a lot of that with this. I felt like, you know, him, you know, using modern at the time, filmmaking techniques really helped this project to, you know, flesh it out and make it wasn't in 3D, but to make it 3-dimensional, quote unquote, 3-dimensional, in that, you know, it felt like a real world. It felt lived in, and it felt like this was, you know, could potentially be really happening. I actually dig vampire movies. I love the, you know, the history and the mythology and all that stuff behind it. Unless it's Twilight. That was what I was going to ask Gary. It was, you know, did Jen watch this? And, you know, with her fondness of Twilight, what she thought. But in terms of what I dig this. This is cool. It's a little long, but honestly, it's pretty solid. It's a really solid movie.
Jennifer watched this. She was fine with this movie. She likes this movie too. She probably would land with you.
You'll have to ask Kat first.
She would probably land with you that she likes this more than well, it's like, you know, we talked about before, like with Texas Chainsaw, like that's an uncomfortable movie. She seemed to not give a shit about eating alive. And with this movie, like she digs it. Like there's a vibe about this one. Feels really late 70s, early 80s. It's just got that.
It does, yeah.
It's got that atmosphere about it. Yeah, it's just, it works that way. So she's cool with it. She's just more forgiving than us is part of the problem. It's why she likes Twilight. So anyway, no, the pacing thing for me is like, I guess going into it, knowing that it was a TV miniseries, I just expected it to be long, but nothing about it felt off for me with how long it went.
Even when you edit the two halves together, like it works very well as a single 3-hour film, I think.
There are certain things, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not just like blowing this movie. There are things about it that like, yeah, I think the weird shot of like the kid biting Jeffrey Lewis's neck when he falls on the coffin, and like it just like freeze frames and like closes in on it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Some of that's kind of cheesy.
Well, that was the end of that first half. So then, you know, it would have done that and then credits and, you know.
Yeah,
But
there's
didn't
some
it
of
do
that
that
stuff
2 or
though that
3
doesn't work for it
times?
as a movie.
It does it during commercial breaks on a couple of other occasions. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some of that. And, you know, the first real time you get to hang out with Barlow and he like bangs the kids' parents' heads together. It's just kind of like, it's relaxed. It's like,
it is a little slapsticky.
yeah, you're like, dude, you made Texas Chainsaw. Like, you know how to do this better than this. But I guess he's just kind of pulling back a little. But then I stand by the fact that there are the scenes like the kid floating through the window and the crawling towards the open doorway that I'm just like, God dang, this is creepy now, much less in 1979 or whatever. Like this,
I gotta imagine that the list of possible killing scenarios for Barlow to kill the two parents, I gotta imagine that list must have been really long, and then they were just, and like the studio or executives kept shooting stuff down of like, oh, standards and practices isn't going to go for that. They're not going to go for that one either. And then somebody was just like, well, why don't we just have them bang their heads together? Like,
why don't we just pretend this is a Three Stooges thing? And Hooper did it.
What's sad about that is
and
he could have
Hooper's
just done it off
Fuck
screen.
you guys, I am going to do that.
Yeah.
What's even crazier is that like he could have done it off screen is the thing that Tobe Hooper is like really great about. Like he could have just been like, made a crunching sound or something and not shown anything, and it would have probably worked. Like he's very skilled at that sort of thing. Like with Texas Chainsaw, you don't see anybody just like completely get gutted in the middle of the movie, but you fucking know it happened.
Yeah.
So,
well, Gary, I do have to wonder what some modern day internet, we'll call them film critics, modern day film critics on the internet have had to say about this, because this feels like one that maybe there are going to be some haters out there.
There are definitely some haters, and there are some people that have like decently just like well thought out reviews of it and that sort of thing. But a lot of people love Stephen King, so as you can expect, if somebody reads Stephen King and then they watch this movie, well, then somebody's going to need a nap. All right. So let's go with, I love that a lot of these people just like really went out on their usernames. Like they really just fucking nailed it. Here's Stanley Strangelove. He says, the title of his review is Drive a Stake Through This One. Salem's Lot is one of Stephen King's better books, but this film sucked all the life from it. Much like most of the other adaptations of King's novels, Salem's Lot by Tobe Hooper is terrible, to the point of almost being unwatchable. Why the great James Mason would want to be in this inferior production is beyond knowing. David Soul and Bonnie Bedelia are strictly lightweight actors. They can't carry a film. Salem's Lot, the novel, was creepy, neo-Gothic. It was a work about vampires. Salem's Lot, the film, is a dull, neo-stupid example of film vapidness. Hooper has never made a good film in his career, and Salem's Lot is just another example of his cinematic incompetence. My rating, total dud.
Total dud out of 10?
Love.
Total dud out of 10.
Okay.
Worst hoary. Worst horror movie ever from Bill the Butcher 231.
Bill the Butcher.
Bill the Butcher 231.
It's actually Daniel Day-Lewis. That's his screen name.
Oh, God.
Without a doubt, this has been the worst, most stupidly, ridiculously cliched, laughable horror movie I have ever seen.
This is in all caps?
Emphasizing this, it ever was in all caps. Scene had 6 exclamation points afterwards. Well, obviously that line sums up what the rest of this review is like. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of Stephen King and his adapted movies like Rose Red, The Shining, Pet Sematary. A lot of people thought Pet Sematary was crap, but any horror movie, even Hollow Man, is better than this.
Wow.
Ooh.
To start with, the vampires look so fake that I laughed when I saw the first one. To be honest, me and my friend laughed through the entire movie. The horror in this movie is also laughable, like when you see the hand come up, the camera freezes and zooms up on it. How tacky. The final vampire is the funniest because he is a blue rat looking thing. One scene a lot of people on the IMDb have been saying was the scariest was actually, you guessed it, the funniest. The blue rat guy appears in a guy's prison cell and goes, wah, wah. I cracked up. I told my friend we should have turned it off. Anyway, this movie entertained me because it was so hopelessly stupid and should be classified as a comedy. It's the worst horror movie ever, prime time. 0 out of 10, terrible.
Prime time.
He wrote that. He wrote
all the caps, fact that the
worst horror movie ever, period, prime time. All caps.
There are two moments in that review that I immediately questioned this guy's taste. One is that the first Stephen King adaptation he mentions is Rose Red, which is not an adaptation. It was an original screenplay, but very odd one to bring up. And also, of all the horror movies you could have compared this to in all of the history of cinema, you brought up Hollow Man.
Even Hollow Man, all caps. 7 exclamation points after it. I got 2 more. Let's keep going. Travis T says, I would not recommend this movie to anyone for any reason. This is from Amazon. This is a verified purchase. He bought this movie. This was such a disappointing movie. It has a runtime of 3 hours, which is long to begin with, but when you added the fact that the characters have no development at all, the movie seems to jump from scene to scene with no real reasoning or explanation for why there was a scene change with absolutely no setup. The whole movie felt like the director had no real idea how to start or end a scene and just started and ended scenes with no fluidity whatsoever. I would also like to mention that I have read the book on which this adaptation is based on. Most people who read the book and then watch the movie find the movie to be terrible, not specifically in regards to this movie, but movies in general. I found the movie to actually be better because I had read the book first. The reason being, if I had read the book first, I would be quite confused during a lot of the scenes because the directing and writing for a good amount of the scenes is so horrendous. It is very difficult to even understand what or why something is happening without the context of the book. I understand that I sound like one of those annoying people who can't stop berating a movie just because the book is so much better, but I really don't mean to come off that way. I can truly say that this movie is actually worse if you don't read the book first, which is almost never the case when dealing with book to movie adaptations. I don't ever really review movies, so this might not be totally well written, but I hope people get the idea. This movie, it's beyond trash. If you find the premise of this movie intriguing, I would recommend the book. And if you can't be bothered to read the book, then I would opt out of reading the film's plot summary on Wikipedia. But it's more thrilling than this movie. I tried to give that like a sympathetic voice. All right, one more, and I swear I'll stop. Paul Petchula. His title for this review is, all caps, no stars. And I want you to know, when I get excited towards the end, the last half of this review is in all caps. I kind of forgot about my boogie shoes and cocaine. Of course, I was just 13 or so when this movie came out. You see, there were a few things happening at this time, and unfortunately, David Soul, in between giving some hair-raising punishment to his wife on a regular basis, he had time to make movies. Now, I don't hate David Soul. I remember to this day watching his start of his career on a drive-in screen in Dirty Harry, or one of those Eastwood movies. He was riding a police motorcycle. Anyway, now then, I'm sure in between beatings of his girlfriends, he was getting lots of offers to do different movies and stuff. Unfortunately, he accepted doing this movie. And it took me a while to figure it out. And here's how it went. Director says, okay, I want to see Soul walking in those nice bell-bottom jeans, so I won't bore you with any more, but thanks to Starsky and Hutch, he was pretty much right. And then the people at that time knew that you delivered a pretty good right hook to your gal. Well, this was a plus. It was street cred for the time. Jesus, this makes me feel even older. So I would recommend seeing this if you really want to see severe action like David Soul walking from his car to the real estate office, because that's about as good as this shit gets. It goes downhill from there. I watched this idiotic movie for exactly 1 hour and 3 minutes, at which time the action had heated to its peak as the first dark scenes began. I just couldn't take it anymore. Don't waste $18 like I did. My son was 7 when he saw this and was sleeping in no time. I told him this was a dope movie.
Was that Charlie Brown trying to kick the football at the end?
That was legit the review.
Wow, he was.
Wow, and it sounded. I sound incomprehensible. I'm just directly reading this review.
He sounds like not like he needs a nap, but also maybe a chill pill.
I was gonna say some heavy medication. Jeez.
Oh man, well, regardless, this is often, maybe not by these people, but by many, it is often considered one of kind of the all-time great vampire movies. It's been cited as the influence from everything from Fright Night to The Lost Boys to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Brian Fuller, the guy who created Hannibal, he has discussed its influence. He did an episode of The King Cast. It's a really good podcast about Stephen King movies. He was on there a couple months ago, and he said that the scene where the character is impaled on deer antlers there towards the end inspired him to do a similar scene in Hannibal, because the original scene had freaked him out so much as a kid. And then Salem's Lot inspired a sequel as well. In 1987, Larry Cohen, which, if you remember, was one of the filmmakers attached to the film before Hooper was involved, he directed a movie called Return to Salem's Lot. And I got to tell you guys, I watched it last night, and it is certainly a Larry Cohen movie. Has absolutely nothing to do. I mean, it is set in Jerusalem's Lot, and there are vampires, but it has no relationship to the King novel, or really there aren't any like characters from this movie in it. But it's got Michael Moriarty doing that weird thing that he always does in Larry Cohen movies, and it's got some pretty fun gore and creatures. That there are blue vampires in it that kind of look like Barlow, but they're kind of they're big prosthetic, like rubbery mask looking. I don't know. You should watch it. It's really weird, and it once again ends spoiler, but in the town of Salem's Lot burning down, which doesn't that happen in this movie?
Well, they burned down the house.
The house down. Yeah, the house burns
anyway.
down.
It's worth checking out. It was not like a miniseries. It's a regular movie, and I think it got like a small limited theatrical release, but it was basically straight to video. Anyway, if you like Larry Cohen, it's worth checking out if you like his weird form of filmmaking, which I personally do. So I enjoyed it. So then in 2004, another adaptation of the King novel aired as a 2-part miniseries on TNT. This time starring Rob Lowe as Ben Mears and Donald Sutherland as Richard Straker and James Cromwell as Father Callahan.
How about that?
Yeah. and Rutger Hauer as Kurt Barlow. So obviously, and they're doing the thing where Barlow is more of like a count. He's not like a monster. So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you don't use Rutger Hauer if you're not going to use Rutger Hauer.
I read some stories about it where like Rutger Hauer would have he would show up, and he had like one day he showed up and had this big speech his character was supposed to give, and he comes and instead decides he's going to do like the thing he did in Blade Runner, where he's just going to make shit up on the spot. So he has this big soliloquy, and he just starts talking about being a cowboy, which doesn't make any sense. He's a German count who's been turned into a vampire. And then the director's like, all right, for the next take, can you just do the script? And he didn't know any of his lines. And they ended up, this is from a story that Rob Lowe told in an interview. So they ended up having to hold cards up off screen for Rutger Hauer to read for his big speech.
That is fucking nuts. Didn't he also do the Argento Dracula? Wasn't that Rutger Hauer?
Yeah, I think he is in the Argento, the Dracula 3D or whatever.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, he kind of looks like a vampire.
All right.
Honestly.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess at a certain point, you just feel like you're Rutger Hauer, and you're like,
you can do whatever the fuck you want.
I'll say what I feel like saying. So,
yeah. And then as recently as 2019, it was announced that a new theatrical film based on the novel would be made. They've got Gary Doberman, who wrote it, chapter 1 and 2, and then James Wan producing. And Doberman's actually been announced as a director. He was announced last April 2020, that he'd be directing, which I don't know that he's ever directed. I think he's mostly a screenwriter. I believe this might be his first directing gig. But yeah, it seems like we've got another Salem's Lot on the way. So we'll see how that plays out. But
there's a weird thing with like people that just really love to romanticize the idea of vampires. And I feel like this is especially, I don't know. Like it just felt like at the time, probably the biggest vampire you would have known was like people would have known maybe Nosferatu, but Dracula is obviously the vampire of choice.
Right.
And there's a romanticism involving Dracula, just like how he acts. So it's a step, I feel like, to portray the vampire as just a monster. And I think that Tobe Hooper like leaned into that. Like at the beginning, I talked about like he just felt like Stephen King got more of what a vampire was. And even later, and maybe you were going to touch on this, but like, it even seemed like Stephen King got it. Like he was kind of cool with what Hooper did here, that the vampire is a parasite. Like it's a thing. Like it's more believable when it's a monster. I mean, I think this carries over to guys like Guillermo del Toro when they do things like the Strain series and stuff like that. I don't know if many people have watched that, but that like I enjoyed that series, and it was very much like it's a virus, and it's a gross thing more than it's like you're a fancy pants dude who just like drinks blood and gets cool about it. Like it's
you're right though. Stephen King was a fan. I mean, this is often spoken of as like one of the better Stephen King adaptations, but Stephen King said that the movie exceeded his expectations for what they could get away with on television. He was a big fan of Hooper's version of the story. And as for Hooper, the success of the miniseries really felt like the victory that he'd been waiting for after the disappointments of Eaten Alive and The Dark not really happening. He said, this is a quote, "This is a quantum leap for me. It's a major studio production. I'm working with a fantastic cast and crew, and Koberts is wonderful. This is a first for me. Also, Salem's Lot does not rely on the same kind of dynamics as Chainsaw. It is scary, it is atmospheric, but in a different way." And that last point is kind of notable because Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is undoubtedly a masterpiece to most people, except for one of our co-hosts. But it's not a mainstream film. It's with this movie, by successfully creating a polished studio-backed film like Salem's Lot, Hooper showed that he could kind of work outside of the low-budget exploitation fringe cinema world of Chainsaw and Eaten Alive. The Salem's Lot is a traditional horror film. It was created to satisfy mainstream audiences who were staying at home to watch a movie on a Saturday night. That's a big jump from where he started and where his career seemed to be going. By working with a significant budget, a professional crew, big name actors, and a producer that knew what he wanted, Hooper proved that Texas Chainsaw was no fluke. He could deliver the goods. This guy was not like a one-hit wonder. And so fans eagerly awaited what he would do next. And what he would do next was a film that was kind of made to cash in on the then burgeoning slasher movie subgenre. But in typical, Tobe Hooper fashion, he didn't get there without a few bumps in the road along the way. But next week, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the story of that film, which is Tobe Hooper's 1981 slasher movie, The Funhouse.
Ooh. Yeah, I was trying to like bounce it around in my head. Like what's sad about Tobe Hooper is that so far it's been like, I just want to make movies. Like that's all I care about. Yeah. I just want to do that. Okay, well, it's not easy. to break through that glass ceiling. That's not like a easy thing to do. But I found if you do a niche, like that's the way to go. I'm going to do a horror movie because like horror seems hot right now. And then people were like, Toby goes and does a horror movie. And then people are like, fuck, man, that's fucked up. Like, that's kind of cool. Like, you did it, man. You fucked some people up. And all right, you come on to LA. All right, here you are. And then he makes Eaten Alive. And people are like, man, dude, you need to calm the fuck down. Like, that's not too much horror. Don't get weird. Don't get like crazy people weird. Like let's dial it back a little bit.
We like what you did, but we don't want you to do it again.
Yeah, don't do that anymore.
We want. Can you somehow make that kind of money for us without doing that again?
Right. So he finally like lands like Salem's Lot. And it's the first time it feels like for Tobe Hooper, he's just been like, I'm on TV. I got to keep it cool. But like, I know a trick here and there and blah, blah, blah. And people are like, that's not going to work. Oh shit, that does work. And like, you know, they're cool with him a little bit. Let's balance this out. Like it's maybe we're working, you know, the next thing you should do is a slasher movie. Cause that's the shit. That's the shit. You got to do a slasher now, you know, and by the way, I mean, and everything I've seen of him, even at this point, I mean, he talks about it in interviews. Like I know when and where I got pigeonholed. I know that I'm a genre filmmaker, and it's not, you know, you talked about him being the most chill guy in the world. It's like sad and cool at the same time. Like he's just like, you know, I get it. Like he's like,
it just sounds like he wasn't disillusioned by anything. Like he had a firm grip of who he was and what he was doing, what he was making, what he enjoyed. And and as he went along, it seems like what people were willing to pay for. So
yeah.
Well, his thing is like literally I saw an interview before we did this podcast where he talked about that, like, it's not a bad job. I'm happy to have this job. You can switch what people think of you if you want to take like 25 years in between pictures. But if you want to make a living, if you want to do your job, like they're going to come to you when they know you can make this happen. And that's what I am.
It's kind of like that compartmentalization thing you talked about earlier. Like he always focused on just what movie needed to be made. He was never concerned with, like some filmmakers, the overall scope and how people are going to view your entire career. It was just all about the movie, what was being made right now, not what was being made later or what people are going to think about your legacy down the line. It was just about the next job.
Well, it's so funny. Like you summarized it like that. And we were kind of talking about that, but I think we even mentioned that on an earlier episode where he just like, he said, you know, to a fault, probably a lot of directors look at these things like, as a whole, what am I doing? And he was just, what can I get hired for? This is my job. I'm going to do my best at this thing. Like you said, maybe to a fault.
Didn't always work out for him.
Yeah,
unfortunately. But we'll get back more into Tobe Hooper's story next week. Thank you for joining us for part 3 of the tragedy of Tobe Hooper. If you want to follow along, if you want to watch the Funhouse along with us, head to cinemashock.net. You can't watch it there, but you can find links to where you can watch it legally. It's streaming in a lot of places, so it should be pretty easy for you to find. It's also a really rad Shout Factory Blu-ray of it out there that you can get for a pretty decent price. You can also follow the show at cinema_shock on Twitter and Instagram. Go like us on Facebook. Follow us everywhere and, rate, review, and all that stuff. Share us with your friends. And you guys want to tell everyone where you can be found on the internet?
Share us with all of your friends. I love your friends. Please share us.
We want them to love us. We need their love.
Have them love us as much as we love you. That's the real important thing. I am at This Is Gary Horne on everything. And generally speaking, earlier in the day, I've consumed less alcohol. So so my tweets will be more coherent, and I'll give you like something from like Marcus Aurelius or something like that. But then like later in the night, you want to get me fired up about politics or something else, Twitter Wild. You got to get on there.
Gary did not get in political arguments on Twitter.
I try not to, genuinely.
It's a bad idea.
I try not to, but people always got something to bitch about on Twitter. No, I'm generally happy on Twitter. I'm trying to talk about movies, and thank you guys who have sent in like kind words for real about what we're doing here, and we're trying to do deep dives into like all these cult movies, and we appreciate everybody who listens. And please, if you're listening to this right now and you enjoy what we're doing and you haven't said anything, let us know what you want to hear. Let us know a series. If you have an idea of something you want deep dives into, we're so open to those concepts. We want to hear what you got. So anyway, at cinema_shock, that's where you should send those.
Yeah. Todd, how about you, man?
You can follow me trying to be funny at Mr. Todd A. Davis on all the socials. And I have a little Star Trek podcast that's just getting off the ground, and you can hit me up there at Computer Resume. It is the Computer Resume podcast. For all things Star Trek, for fans new and old. We're going through the entire franchise. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Like I said, we're just getting off the ground. So it's going to live and breathe and grow. It's going to be my little baby. And
I think you're going to get there in like a year and a half when you're in the actual Star Trek show.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention one other thing in the discussion of the movie that I forgot to mention, and I just want to throw this in real quick. Bob Burns, who is the art director for Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Tobe Hooper talks about in the scenes with the kid and his room and the models and stuff like that. I know this is out of nowhere. I'm sorry, it's out of left field, but it just hit me again that he was talking about like Stephen King. This is how much Tobe Hooper cared. In Stephen King's book, he talks about these Revel models that this kid is working on of like horror and like planes and tanks and like whatever in his room, and they could not find them. Their production company couldn't find them. Anybody couldn't find them. So he called Bob Burns, who he had worked with on Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and he knew Bob Burns liked models, and he asked him like, "Hey man, like this book talks about these Revel models. Can you find them?" And he said, "I don't know, Toby. Let me look. Let me see what I can find." And he said that he waited like a week or two and was going to call him back, and got a package in the mail. And it was a huge box of Revel models all put together, ready to go. And it was from Bob Burns with a bill for $25. And he said, this is the best production deal in Hollywood history.
That's awesome.
And I just thought that was really cool. Like he just wanted to put together some models, man. He was like, "Now I got a reason. So pay me $25."
That's fun.
That's cool.
Well, I'm at Justin_Bishop on Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd. Are you guys updating your Letterboxd?
I'm doing terrible at it, man. I got to really get on it.
Putting it on the to-do list.
I'm trying to get people to just.
I paid again for another year of Letterboxd, and I'm just still not.
You're a patron. That's like $50 a year.
Well, I switched it to like
Pro.
The Pro.
That's
I switched it to Pro.
What's the benefit of Pro?
You get
pretty much.
There are some little tweaks, but there are some little things you can do, like clone lists and things like that. But it's mostly to help support them, honestly.
Yeah, I just like the idea of Letterboxd existing, and I encourage everyone to fully support them. I got to get on it. I watch movies all the time.
Even if you just log them, like not everyone wants to write a review for every movie, but just log them and give them a star rating. You know?
Yeah,
that's fun. Well, I'm on there. I stay active on there, so.
This is Gary Horne on Letterboxd. You can find me, and people have been following me, and I appreciate that. And I am sorry that I have failed you.
Well, until next week.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre has a 1.5 star rating from Todd. I just want to throw that out.
It does. 1.5 stars. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Todd gave it 1.5 stars. Hey, Todd, we got some homework for you.
Oh boy, what do you got?
top 10 horror movies of all time. Your top 10 horror movies, your top 10 favorite horror movies, or what you think are the 10 best horror movies of all time.
Those are two different lists. So be specific. Am I giving
I think
it should be or my favorites?
I think there is a series for this show that revolves around like Todd writing down right now, what are your top 10 favorite horror movies?
I'll give you till next week when we record next episode.
Okay, but my favorites or what I think are the top 10?
Whatever the fuck you think top 10
God
means.
damn it.
What are your favorite horror movies?
Okay, my top 10 favorite horror movies. Okay.
Yeah, and maybe we can make a whole series out of what Todd's favorite horror movies are. And we can just run through
That's your homework for next week.
Okay.
I kind of like that. I kind of think that's fun. Let's see what does it take to get Todd's goat? Like that's a Halloween reference. I don't know if you've seen that, Todd, but it's one of my favorite horror movies.
That's a good one. It should be on your list, but we don't know if it will be. Anyway, until next week,
may the wings of liberty never lose a feather.
And be excellent to each other.
Johnny has the keys. Give them to the master.
I fucking hate this. I hate all of it. All right.
Deal with it. Hey, if you're going to give me homework assignments, you got to deal with Johnny has the keys.